December 20th, 1976. Carbon County, Pennsylvania. The temperature hasn't risen above freezing in days. The Lehigh River moves sluggishly beneath a skin of ice, and the scrub brush along the banks is dead and bare, rattling in the wind off the ridge. A 14-year-old boy is out here alone, doing what kids did in 1976 before the internet, just wandering, kicking rocks, breathing cold air, and then he sees something on the bank. 3 suitcases, 2 of them split wide open from the impact of falling 300 feet off the Interstate 80 bridge above. The third is still sealed, half hidden in the frozen undergrowth. He gets closer. Something is sticking out of one of the broken cases. His first thought is that it looks like a plastic doll's head, the kind his younger sister might have left somewhere. He takes one more step. It isn't a doll. He runs. What that boy had unknowingly stumbled into would remain one of the most disturbing, heartbreaking, and institutionally neglected cold cases in Pennsylvania state history. A case that would stay open for 44 years. A case where the victim would spend more than 4 decades buried under a name that was not her own, in a town she had never visited, with no flowers from anyone who loved her. A case that was ultimately cracked not by a detective, not by a forensic lab breakthrough announced on the evening news, but by an ordinary man in Texas who just wanted to know where his family came from. This is the story of Evelyn Koland. She was 15 years old, she was pregnant, she was from Jersey City, New Jersey, and the man who knew exactly what had happened to her had been driving a bus through the streets of New York City every single day for 45 years, while her family waited for a phone call that never came. To understand what happened in those Pennsylvania woods in December of 1976, you have to go back to New Jersey first. Back to a cramped apartment in Jersey City, where the Koland family, 6 kids, 2 parents, lived the kind of tight-knit immigrant life where the walls are thin enough to hear your mother singing in the kitchen from across the apartment. Evelyn Koland was born on April 17, 1961, the daughter of Luis Koland Sr. and Aurelia Torres. She grew up speaking Spanish before English, eating home-cooked food every night, and being watched over with the fierce, quiet love that immigrant mothers carry in their bones. In 1976, when Evelyn was 15, she met a young man named Luis Sierra. He was 19, 4 years older than her, and he had grown up in the same neighborhood, practically next door to the Koland family. Not long after they began seeing each other, Evelyn became pregnant. The Koland family wasn't happy about it, but they accepted the reality. Luis Koland Sr. looked at his teenage daughter with her growing belly and saw his grandchild. He saw family. He had no reason to believe he was seeing her for the last time. But Evelyn's younger sister, Magdalia, had seen something the parents had missed, or perhaps refused to see. Sierra was possessive in a way that went beyond jealousy. He would lock Evelyn inside the apartment. He controlled who she saw when she left and what she did. And at some point in those final weeks, Evelyn had told her mother directly, "If anything happens to me, he is the one you should look for." Mrs. Aurelia Torres heard those words from her daughter's mouth. Then the letter from Connecticut arrived, and those words got buried under the weight of relief. In mid-December of 1976, Evelyn called her mother. She wasn't feeling well. She said, "Could her mother bring soup?" Aurelia Torres cooked a pot and walked over to the apartment. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Silence. When she pushed the door open, the apartment was bare. No furniture. No daughter. No Sierra. Neighbors said they had moved out. Just like that. Then in January 1977, a letter arrived. It was written in Spanish, postmarked from Stamford, Connecticut. The message was brief and reassuring. Evelyn had given birth to a healthy 9-pound baby boy. They had relocated to Connecticut. Everything was fine. She would be in touch when she needed to be. Don't worry. Luis Koland Sr. read that letter over and over. This was 1977. There was no way to verify it. No cell phone to call, no email to trace, no address to cross-reference against a database. When a letter arrived, you believed the letter. That was the only thing available to believe. So the family waited. Weeks became months. Months became years. Years became decades. And the letter sat in a drawer somewhere, the last physical proof anyone had that Evelyn Koland was still alive, until a fire eventually destroyed even that. While the Koland family in Jersey City held onto that letter like a lifeline, the Pennsylvania State Police were working a homicide case with almost nothing to go on. The victim recovered from the Lehigh River bank on December 20, 1976, was a young woman. She was petite, dark hair, olive complexion, and she had been carrying a baby nearly to full term, a girl, as the autopsy would later confirm. The manner of death, strangulation, compounded by severe blunt trauma to the face and a gunshot wound to the neck. The dismemberment of her body had been performed after death, with a methodical precision that told investigators this was not the work of panic. Whoever did this had planned it. They knew what they were doing. The 3 suitcases were common, mass-produced, untraceable. The blanket wrapped around the remains was the kind sold in every department store in America. There was no identification, no jewelry with an inscription, no wallet, no keys, no prescription bottles. Nothing that could tell police who she was. A composite sketch was drawn from the remains and circulated widely. Nobody called, nobody recognized her. Nobody came forward to say they were missing a daughter, a sister, a girlfriend. The silence wasn't because nobody loved her. It was because the person who killed her had already controlled the story. That letter from Connecticut had been doing its job for over a month by the time investigators were kneeling in the frozen mud of that riverbank. The perpetrator hadn't just committed a murder. He had engineered a disappearance so complete that the victim's own grieving family had no idea there was anything to grieve. The investigation stalled almost immediately. Without an identity, there was no direction. Detectives ran down every lead they had. None of them led anywhere. 7 years passed. In 1983, Carbon County officials made a decision that underscores just how broken the system was for victims without names. They buried her. A simple graveside ceremony with no family present because no family had been found. The name on the headstone, Beth Doe, the only date, 1960 sec. 1900 sec. 1933. Ninth. Ninth. Oh no! Ninth.
The ninth second. Ninth.
For anyone who wants to pause and feel the full weight of that image, a Puerto Rican teenager buried under a false name in a town she'd never set foot in, while her mother sat by a window in New Jersey waiting for a phone call, pause on it, because that image stayed true for 44 years. The Pennsylvania State Police never formally closed the Beth Doe case. The file stayed open, the evidence was preserved, and every time forensic science took a significant leap forward, investigators took another run at it. That institutional persistence matters. It's worth saying out loud because it's the reason this case was eventually solved at all. In 2007, they tried isotopic analysis, a technique that examines chemical ratios in teeth and bones to determine where a person grew up, based on the specific minerals absorbed through local food and water supplies over a lifetime. The results were surprising, and they sent the investigation in the completely wrong direction. The isotopic signature suggested that the victim had likely grown up in Central Europe, somewhere in the range of Poland, the Czech Republic, or Slovakia. Police pivoted. They contacted immigration authorities. They searched records of Eastern European immigrant communities on the East Coast. They went through missing persons databases from multiple countries. Years passed. Nothing matched. Because the isotopic analysis hadn't accounted for something important. Puerto Rican families who had lived in the continental United States for generations, eating from a diverse national food supply, could produce isotopic profiles that looked nothing like what the models predicted. The technology pointed west when the answer was always in New Jersey. Then, in 2019, a new lead arrived, and it looked, for a brief moment, like it might actually be the one. A woman came forward to say she recognized the composite sketch. She believed the victim was a woman named Malign Cruz, a young woman who had disappeared from the Massachusetts foster care system in the mid-1970s, had last been heard from in the summer of 1976, saying she was pregnant and needed money, and had then simply vanished. The details aligned in a way that made investigators genuinely believe they were close. The media ran with it. The Cruz family was contacted, and then police found Malign Cruz, alive, in her home. Not Beth Doe, another wall, another dead end, another year of hope erased. But Detective Brian Null and his colleagues at the PSP kept the file alive. They kept the evidence, and when the next technological frontier arrived, they stepped toward it. In 2020, the PSP partnered with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and DNA Labs International to try something that hadn't existed as a viable forensic tool even a decade earlier. They contacted a laboratory in Houston, Texas called Othram, a company built specifically to handle cold cases that had defeated every other lab. Othram's specialty was next-generation genome sequencing, extracting usable genetic profiles from biological materials so degraded by time and environment that conventional DNA techniques couldn't touch it. They sent Othram a sample from Beth Doe's remains, bone decades old, buried in Pennsylvania soil since 1983. In February of 2021, Othram returned a complete genetic profile. That profile was uploaded into commercial genealogical databases, the kind that millions of ordinary Americans voluntarily contribute to every year when they order ancestry kits and spit into tubes, hoping to learn where their grandparents were really from. The algorithm went to work, and it came back with a match. More than 1,700 centimorgans of shared DNA with a man named Luis Colon Jr., living in Texas. For reference, 1,700 centimorgans is roughly the level of genetic overlap you'd expect between a niece or nephew and an aunt or uncle. The math was immediate, and it was devastating. Luis Colon Jr. had no idea any of this was coming. He was the son of Luis Colon Sr., meaning he was Evelyn's nephew. He had grown up with the story of the aunt he'd never met. His father had told him about Evelyn, about the letter from Connecticut, about the years of asking around and getting nowhere. Luis Colon Jr. had carried that story into adulthood, and, when DNA testing services became widely available, he had submitted his own sample to 23andMe and Family Tree DNA, not because he suspected a murder, not because he had any reason to think Evelyn was dead, but because he wanted to find her. He wanted to fill in the gaps in his family tree, and maybe, if he was lucky, find the aunt his father had never stopped searching for. He didn't find her through a consumer ancestry app. He found her because the Pennsylvania State Police called him. When the PSP reached Luis Colon Jr. and began asking questions about missing relatives, he told them everything his father had ever shared: Evelyn's name, her relationship with Luis Sierra, the pregnancy, the apartment in Jersey City, the letter postmarked from Connecticut, the years of fruitless searching. Then he called his sister, Miriam Colon Veltman. He sent her a link, the Wikipedia page for the Beth Doe case. Miriam opened the page. She looked at the composite sketch, a facial reconstruction drawn from the remains of a young woman found in Carbon County in 1976. And without any forensic training, without any side-by-side comparison, without any prompting, she said to her brother, "That looks like our Evelyn." DNA confirmation followed, more than 1,700 centimorgans. Beth Doe was Evelyn Colon, the woman who had been buried in an unmarked grave in Carbon County for almost 4 decades, finally had her name back. Not Beth, not Doe. Evelyn Colon, age 15, of Jersey City, New Jersey, when Luis Colon Sr., Evelyn's brother, the eldest of the Colon siblings, received the news. The man who had grown up watching his parents hold that Connecticut letter and believe it, who had stood beside his mother's hospital bed in 2000 and heard her whisper, "Find Evelyn," with what turned out to be some of her final breaths. He said something that became the sentence his family could never forget afterward. "All this time, we were looking for Evelyn Colon, not Beth Doe." Their mother, Aurelia Torres, had died in the year 2000, not knowing the truth. She had spent 24 years sitting by windows, seeing shapes in crowds that looked like her daughter, asking relatives if they'd heard anything. She had raised Evelyn, had stood at the door of that empty apartment holding a pot of soup. She had read that letter from Connecticut and believed it because there was nothing else to believe. She died before anyone could tell her. Louis Colin Sr. later said that if his mother had learned the truth while she was still alive, it would have killed her long before the illness did. There is a particular cruelty in that sentence that deserves to just sit there for a moment without any commentary. As soon as the DNA identification was confirmed, PSP investigators moved fast. The Colin family told them everything they knew about Luis Sierra, where he had grown up, what he had been like with Evelyn, the nickname Wiso that everyone in the neighborhood had called him by. Evelyn's sister Magdalia gave a statement about the violence and the isolation. She described how Evelyn had once told her mother directly that she was afraid of Sierra and that he should be the first person police looked at if something happened to her. Investigators also noted that based on Evelyn's limited literacy in English, the 1977 letter from Connecticut, written in fluent Spanish, had almost certainly not been written by her. The PSP found Luis Sierra living in Ozone Park, Queens. He was 63 years old. He was employed as a bus driver. He had a stable residence. He had no criminal record. His neighbors knew nothing about him beyond the ordinary facts of daily life. For 45 years, Luis Sierra had gotten up every morning, driven a city bus through the streets of New York, come home, and gone to sleep, while Evelyn Colin lay under a stranger's name in a Carbon County cemetery, while her family searched and grieved and waited, while her mother aged toward death without ever knowing what had happened to her daughter. On March 31, 2021, Detective Brian Null and a coordinated team knocked on Sierra's door in Ozone Park. He opened it. When Null told him they were investigating a missing person case and wanted to ask about Evelyn Colin, Sierra said he didn't know anyone by that name. When the year 1976 was mentioned, his expression changed. He admitted he knew her. He admitted she had been pregnant with his child. He claimed the last time he saw her was at the Jersey City apartment. He offered no explanation for why he had never attempted to find his pregnant girlfriend after she disappeared. He had no answer for the letter from Connecticut. He had no answer for 45 years of silence. After more than 2 hours, Null stepped outside and called Carbon County. An arrest warrant was signed. Sierra was taken into custody at his home. The charge, criminal homicide. He was later extradited to Pennsylvania, where the Carbon County judge denied bail. According to information that emerged afterward, Sierra admitted during that interview that he himself had written the 1977 letter, the letter the Colin family had held onto as evidence that Evelyn was alive, the letter that had prevented a missing persons report from ever being filed, the letter that had given him 44 years of freedom. On the same day as the arrest, the PSP held a press conference in Laheyton. For the first time in 44 years, the name Evelyn Colin was spoken publicly in connection with those suitcases on the riverbank. Not Beth Doe. Evelyn Colin, 15 years old, from Jersey City. Luis Colin Jr., the grandson whose DNA submission had set all of this in motion, spoke from Texas. He said he lived his whole adult life thinking he got away with it. His sister Miriam called him the hero of the family. The preliminary hearing in April 2021 was the first time Luis Sierra had to sit in a room and listen to the evidence against him. About 30 people packed that courtroom in Weatherly. Colin family members, local reporters, Carbon County residents who had followed the Beth Doe case for decades. Sierra sat in dark prison clothing, hands cuffed, saying nothing. His defense attorney, Robert Madden of Philadelphia, came in with a clear strategy, and he wasn't wrong to deploy it. Madden's core argument: the prosecution had no direct physical evidence linking Sierra to the crime. No weapon, no fingerprints from 1976. No DNA from Sierra on any of the recovered evidence. What the state had was a family's recollections of events from 45 years ago, a destroyed letter that Sierra himself admitted writing, and circumstantial logic. Sierra was the last known person to have been with Evelyn. Madden called the arrest a massive overreach. He also entered into the record a suggestion that investigators should have looked more carefully at a different suspect, a serial killer known to have been active in the same region during the same period, though he named no one publicly. Judge Homich ruled that sufficient preliminary evidence existed to send the case to trial. Sierra was held without bail. But beneath that procedural win for the prosecution, Everyone in that courtroom could see the challenge ahead, building a murder conviction on circumstantial evidence after nearly half a century. In 2022, Sierra was released on bail and returned to his home in Queens. The case moved into pre-trial motions, slow, technical, grinding legal argument. Madden filed a motion to suppress the statements Sierra had made during the March 31st interview in Ozone Park. The argument was precise and constitutionally grounded. Sierra had been the prime suspect in a murder investigation when detectives came to his door, but he had not been read his Miranda rights before the interview began. Madden contended that regardless of the informal setting, his own living room, no handcuffs, no formal arrest, Sierra had not been properly informed of his right to remain silent or his right to counsel before making self-incriminating statements. Those statements, Madden argued, violated the Fifth Amendment and had to be excluded. The PSP countered that Miranda warnings are only constitutionally required when a subject is in custody. Sierra had invited the officers into his home. He had been told he could stop the interview at any time. He was not under arrest when the interview occurred. The warrant came later, after the conversation had already concluded. The motion went before Judge Matika, who took the arguments under advisement, and the fate of one of the prosecution's most important pieces of evidence hung in the air. But the Miranda question turned out to be secondary to a jurisdictional problem that would prove fatal to the case in Pennsylvania. As the pre-trial investigation deepened, both sides increasingly confronted an uncomfortable truth. All available evidence suggested the murder itself had most likely occurred in Jersey City, New Jersey. Sierra and Evelyn's apartment was in Jersey City. Evelyn had vanished from Jersey City. Her mother had gone to an empty apartment in Jersey City. The body had been transported to Pennsylvania after the fact, thrown from a bridge on I-80 to make it disappear. Carbon County was a dumping ground, not a crime scene. And under American law, the state where the crime is committed is the state with jurisdiction to prosecute it. Pennsylvania could not try a murder that happened on New Jersey soil. Defense attorney Madden moved to dismiss all charges. In March 2024, Carbon County prosecutor Michael Greek issued a public statement acknowledging that the alleged crime most likely occurred in Jersey City, New Jersey, and that the charges would therefore be dismissed. The judge agreed. Every charge against Luis Sierra in Pennsylvania was dropped. He had been free on bail since 2022, and now the only legal thread tying him to Evelyn's murder had been cut entirely. The Colon family absorbed the news quietly. No outbursts for the cameras, no angry statements. Just the exhausted composure of people who had been doing this, waiting, hoping, losing, and beginning again for decades. They understood that the case had simply moved to a different state. It was not over. It was starting again. As of mid-2026, the New Jersey authorities received the full case file from Carbon County following the 2024 dismissal. No public information has confirmed that the Garden State has formally charged Luis Sierra in connection with Evelyn Colon's death. He is 67 years old. He lives in Ozone Park, Queens. He is not under any publicly disclosed form of supervision or restriction. He has never been convicted of anything in connection with a crime that, by the evidence now available, he almost certainly committed in the winter of 1976. The unborn child, the near-term baby girl recovered with Evelyn's remains, was given a name by the Colon family. They named her Emily Grace. She has a name now, too. Miriam Colon Veltman, Evelyn's granddaughter, launched a GoFundMe called the official Beth Doe Evelyn Colon Memorial Fund, with a goal that says everything you need to know about how far this family had to fight just to get the basics. They wanted to move Evelyn's remains out of the Carbon County Cemetery, place a proper headstone with her real name on it, and hold a memorial service, something she never had. A burial among people who loved her in a place that knew who she was. Evelyn's father, Luis Colon Sr., did not live to see his sister identified. Her mother, Aurelia Torres, had already died in 2000, 21 years before the DNA match came back. 24 years after Evelyn was killed, still waiting for the phone call that was never going to come. The only person from the parents' generation who lived long enough to learn the truth was Evelyn's brother, Luis, who was 61 years old in 2021 when he stood outside a Carbon County courtroom and shouted at Sierra, "I am Evelyn Colon's brother. I want justice." The Evelyn Colon case has become one of the most studied examples of forensic genealogy applied to cold case identification, and for good reason. The pathway that led from Beth Doe to Evelyn Colon ran directly through a commercial DNA database, the same kind that millions of people use every year to trace their ancestry, find distant cousins, and learn which part of the world their great-grandparents came from. Luis Colin Jr. submitted his DNA to 23andMe and Family Tree DNA with the modest hope of finding a missing aunt. He had no idea he was going to crack a 44-year-old murder investigation. He was just trying to find family. Othram's methodology, building complete genetic profiles from severely degraded biological material using next-generation sequencing, then running those profiles against genealogical databases, is now being applied to hundreds of cold cases across the country. There are thousands of unidentified individuals in American morgues and cemeteries right now, many of them people of color, many of them women, many of them victims of domestic violence. People who, like Evelyn, had their identities erased by the people who killed them. DNA genealogy is giving them their names back, and every name returned is a family somewhere that finally gets an answer, no matter how painful that answer may be. If this case leaves you with anything practical, anything you can actually do, here's what matters most. First, a letter is not proof of life. If someone you love suddenly goes silent and the only explanation is a written message you can't verify, report them missing anyway. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children operates around the clock at 1-800-843-5678 and at missingkids.org. You do not need proof. Suspicion is enough. The Colin family believed that letter because there was nothing else to believe, but today you have options they didn't have in 1977. Second, if you have a relative who disappeared years ago and was never found, submit your DNA to a genealogical database. 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, GED Match, any of them. This is exactly what Luis Colin Jr. did. There are unidentified people in cold case files right now whose DNA is sitting in a database waiting for a familial match that only you can provide. Your submission costs almost nothing and could solve a case that has been open for decades. Third, if someone you care about is in a relationship marked by isolation, extreme jealousy, or controlling behavior, if they tell you they are afraid of their partner, don't wait. Don't tell yourself the letter sounds fine. Evelyn told her mother she was afraid of Luis Sierra. Aurelia Torres heard those words. And then a letter arrived from Connecticut, and everything her daughter had said got buried underneath it. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day at 1-800-799-7233. It serves both people experiencing abuse and family members who are worried about someone they love. Fourth, if you're part of the Puerto Rican, Caribbean, or broader Latinx community and have a family member who went missing and was never found, reach out to organizations like Natasha's Justice Project or the DNA Doe Project. These groups work specifically with communities that have historically been underserved and underrepresented in missing persons systems to pursue identification cases through forensic genealogy. Evelyn's case is a reminder that the system failed her family at multiple points, and that community-based advocacy can fill gaps that official channels leave open. There is a particular kind of injustice that doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't come with a verdict or a press conference. It accumulates quietly over decades in the form of unanswered phone calls and letters that get believed and headstones that carry the wrong name. It accumulates in hospital rooms where mothers die whispering their daughters' names into the dark. It accumulates on the faces of grandsons sitting in front of computers in Texas, just trying to find where their family went. Evelyn Colin was 15 years old. She was 5 months away from her 16th birthday when she was killed. She was weeks away from giving birth to a daughter she never got to name. She grew up in Jersey City eating her mother's cooking and navigating the streets of a Puerto Rican immigrant neighborhood. She fell in love with the wrong person at the wrong age, and she paid for it with everything she had. She spent 44 years in the ground under a name that wasn't hers, in a county she had never visited, while the man who put her there drove the M15 or the Q10 or whatever line he was running that day through the boroughs of New York City. A 14-year-old boy on a frozen riverbank called the police. A genealogical lab in Houston sequenced DNA from decades-old bone. A grandson in Texas spit into a tube. A sister looked at a composite sketch on a Wikipedia page and recognized her aunt without any test needed at all. And Beth Doe finally became Evelyn again. But Luis Sierra, at 67 years old, living without restriction in Queens, has never been convicted of anything. The case is in New Jersey's hands now. Whether New Jersey moves on it, how quickly, and with what outcome, remains to be seen. The Colin family is still waiting. After 44 years of waiting, they are still waiting. Subscribe if this story moved you. Every subscriber is a small act that ensures Evelyn Colin's name keeps getting spoken. Not Beth Doe, not Jane Doe, not a placeholder for a girl nobody came looking for. Evelyn from Jersey City, age 15, and Emily Grace, who never got the chance to be anyone at all.